Welcome to Founders Future, the podcast hosted by Closers.io, where we dive deep into the stories of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for both themselves and their companies. I'm your host, Elliot Boll, and in each episode, we'll uncover the stories behind successful businesses, the challenges faced along the way, and the strategies driving their future expansion. Today, we're excited to be joined by Edo Perry, the CEO and co-founder of Elements. We'll be learning more about his founding story and getting a glimpse into his plans for the future. So let's jump right in, Edo. Welcome to Founders Future.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good to meet you.
It's also a pleasure to meet you, and it's a pleasure to be able to learn from you. And I guess I want to kick off with a kind of direct hang, let's say. Can you give us the kind of flame, the inspiration, or the story behind Elements and help the audience understand a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, happy to. I started my journey about my kind of entrepreneurial journey about a few years ago. I worked at Apple on their sustainability team, was one of their first hires, leading sustainability in Tel Aviv in their R&D site. And after I've been in climate and climate tech for the past 10 years, I've always known that I wanted to do something of my own and find a real problem and a solution for it. And working at Apple, I realized that if all these different corporates are trying to reduce emissions and trying to increase efficiency and reduce costs where possible. So if Apple needs it, probably other companies need it as well. And one of the missing links where we found that there is not a lot of effort and focus is on when it comes to employees. And specifically in that realm, business travel is a huge spend that companies are putting out $1 billion per year and flying across the country, international. And in post-COVID, travel has gone up way more than before. So we found an area where we can reduce costs, increase revenue for companies, and reduce emissions. So it's a win-win on all fronts. And Elements, our goal is to tie in and measure the ROI of trips and basically tie revenue to expenses and then show companies how much we can actually increase efficiency, reduce their costs and emissions while doing that. So yeah.
That's wicked. It must be a powerful feeling to be not only impacting the bottom line, but with this almost like maybe people use the word purpose, but like mission or some kind of bigger energy than just the bottom line. The fact
Right.
that it's all up is quite exciting. Now, from what you shared and my research, it seemed that essentially you had the domain experience, knew that thing, that space, you're
Mhm.
an expert, but then you became an entrepreneur. And that sometimes causes, there are some challenges, there are some teething pains,
Mhm.
there are different things. Can you share maybe an example of the early days, a challenge that you came across and how you sly tackled it?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges is selling to enterprises. And I've never been a sales person in my life prior to, we always sell, we're always selling, right? We're selling ourselves, we're selling our stories, but to sell a product to an enterprise client is always something that's not easy for anybody. And the time frame and the sales cycles that it takes and finding the right persona. So I think the main challenges in an entrepreneurial journey is the founder-led sales. I think is one of the hardest things to unlock and to really define that. And obviously, I'm a more people's person, so it's easier for me to go down that path. But for startups that are more technical, that are harder to sell, I think I always find that the founder-led sales stage is the harder part until you find and until you hire executives and account managers that know how to do this and can basically multiply those selling or the sales cycle. But in the first stages, it's always, I think, the hardest thing to unlock. Yeah.
It's the baptism of fire for an entrepreneur because they have no challenge selling people on their dream, on their vision, but then chucked into a huge complex account with politics, 20 odd stakeholders, the tech side of it, all of this stuff going on.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a bunch of learnings there. Now, I'm curious about your year ahead. What is
Mhm.
it that you're most excited about or focused on this year as it relates to winning customers and growing the business?
Yeah. So I think we've our product has shifted. What I mentioned now has shifted over the course of a few months. We've realized talking to the market, we've met with over 200 Fortune 500 companies, and we heard their needs, heard what their challenges are, and adapted our product according to that. And I'm a big believer in create a solution to to an actual problem and not a problem to a solution, or a solution that doesn't have a problem. So I think one of the biggest challenges or the biggest or the kind of our roadmap is to get as many clients in the Bay Area, New York, in the US, I would say in general, that are in our ICP, which are software companies, law firms, consultants, financial institutions that fly a lot, and just show them the value. So we've done a few different case studies, we've done pilots, we have clients now in Europe as well. So we've had those first stages, and now we're just trying to grow and expand our client base outside. So yeah, that's what we're focused on.
Phenomenal. Okay, I've no doubt about your success. Now, with the space that you're in, it's a topic that's on a lot of consumers' minds broadly. And I'm sure there'll be some business owners that are listening thinking, am I far behind? Where's this going to be? Do you
Hmm.
have a view on how kind of attitudes in leadership and in business and in boardrooms is going to evolve over the coming, let's say, 5 or 10 years on climate as a topic?
Yeah, I think we all have seen the Trump administration that came into office now are not very pushing for climate initiatives and policy. And we will see more private businesses and companies trying to just continue doing what they're doing up until now, and less grant funding and things like that, versus where Europe, we do see more regulation, more funding, more companies that are focused on those initiatives. And Europe is taking the lead on that front, on the climate front. And by the way, we have shifted also according to this. Our messaging has adapted and is much more focused on cost savings, operational efficiency, and reduce as a byproduct, we're reducing emissions by doing that. So we've also had to change the messaging, but in the end, it's the same company. We haven't changed at all. We're still trying to reduce emissions as much as possible. But yeah, I think there are headwinds in the US, especially versus Europe, that's happening now. And I think that will change in 5 years, 5 to 10 years, that will change because, like you said, Gen Z and millennial and consumers care about these issues and want to see their companies that they buy from doing things about it. So, yeah, that's my take on that.
You shared something that piqued my curiosity. You said that you had done an amazing amount of research. You said 200 of the Fortune 500
Hmm.
to, and then you
Yeah,
mentioned adapting your messaging and that idea of pivoting, keeping your ear to the market. That's a really interesting idea. And it's even more interesting from my view in this context because you're saying you're still solving the same problems, you're still
yeah,
contributing the same impact, but the way that the message essentially the way that you communicate with the marketplace is
yeah.
adapt. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is that a science? Is that a feeling? How do you actually go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think nothing we do is a gut feeling. Everything is validated by data and feedback from companies. And we've done a lot of different validation calls and discovery calls in the first phases of our product. And like I mentioned, it's just a matter of messaging. I think the companies today, the big tech companies and the big retail companies, they haven't changed too much of their initiatives to reach net zero. They just changed the messaging. Instead of saying we're investing in climate and sustainability and all that, they're basically trying to reduce the risk, the financial risk of their company. If I'm reducing the risk for wildfires and natural disasters, and it's still climate, but it's different messaging. The messaging has changed, but it's still under the surface, it stay the same. So that's what we had to do as well. And we're focused on cost savings, we're focused on expense, on increasing revenue for companies, in specifically because of travel. If I'm flying now to a conference and it's a waste of my time, then I didn't do anything effectively. But if I go to a certain client that I know that is more effective to meet with them over Zoom or in person, whatever it is, then maybe we're increasing revenue by doing that. So that's how we've shifted and adapted to the market. Hope that answers your question.
Appreciate it. Now, this conversation's flown by, Edo. Before we wrap up, what would you share if you're speaking to a room of founders or the founders that are listening right now? What's the
Hmm.
one piece of advice that you'd hit them with that could change their life, their year, their business? No
Yeah,
pressure.
I think one of the biggest things is that flexibility is always constantly listening to your clients, listening to the feedback, listening to the market, analyzing it, making decisions based on data and actual facts and not just hunches because you think that a client said it's interesting doesn't necessarily mean that it's interesting. So I think always looking for focusing your efforts on 80% on the problem and 20% on the actual solution. The solution will change 100 times. You'll pivot and you'll change it and a feature there and a feature there, but I think the focus on the problem needs to be the majority of your time. And I would primarily focus my time in the early stages of this entrepreneurial in the startup journey, focus on clients rather than trying to raise a big round or do that. Like focus on actually giving value to customers and clients that will pay for your services. And I think it's a misconception that a lot of founders think that you have to go and raise a lot of money from VCs and then and you just raise money and then you close the company after 6 months or a year because you don't have product market fit. So what's the point of that? So I think that's a big misconception that a lot of founders have, especially in the Bay Area, and needs to change.
That's wicked. This conversation's been brilliant. I mean, the three threads that I took, and I'm sure I missed loads, is the idea of staying close to the customer and keeping basically a feedback loop that's not just based on one conversation or feeling, but it's
Hmm.
actually rigorous, methodological, and data driven. Then it's like the piece of almost like problem market fit. Yes, the solution is going to be there and I have to adapt, but getting crystal clear on what the customer needs to be
Yeah.
solving right now. And then wrapped around it all, your passion for contributing, even within that kind of constraint, is, I think, it's a psychological horsepower to carry with you. So I've enjoyed the conversation. Where can people reach out or find you if they wanted to learn more about what you're up to, Edo?
Yeah, LinkedIn is always best. Always happy to answer any founders that have questions and don't know where to start or how to go at addressing and meeting with enterprise clients. You can always feel free to write me on LinkedIn, Edo Perry, EDOPERRY, and then you can find me and happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Awesome. Now that wraps up another inspiring episode of Founders Future. I want to thank Edo for sharing not only his incredible journey, but the insights that he shared throughout the conversation. To our listeners, if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe to Founders Future wherever you listen. You can find more resources and insights at closers.io, where we're dedicated to helping businesses accelerate their sales. Until then, keep climbing and we'll see you on the next one.